what we now have is one that says all of the points, and now this one tells us that we have the planar curve. And these are both on the same, essentially, layer of data, because they both have just one layer. If I go and do, one more thing, sorry about this. If you also get more familiar with where these are located and you know the exact thing that you want, you can double click right inside the canvas and search for a keyword. So I'm going to search for divide, because I want to divide this curve. And you don't have to know sort of what this does yet, just that it exists. You can plug this curve right into here. Again, you can't plug it from the panel, plug it from the entrance. So what this is doing is it's taking this curve and it's dividing it by this number, so 10 times. So all these points now, the curve division points. Run this from P. So now what you see is this will give you all of your points in XYZ values, all 10 of these points that you see here in the screen. And then this is at a different layer. So this is one more level deep. And this comes in handy when you're trying to get branches. Each one of these is called a branch. So what's also helpful, same thing as a panel, if you grab a param viewer, up here in params, then special param viewer, you put that on your canvas. Let's plug in the curve. So you'll get, it says data with one branch. You can double click on this and take a look at your tree. And then we'll pull in the P for the second one. And this is still data with one branch, but this has one more layer. It has 11 numbers in the second one. So if you double click on that, what you'll see is this is just one, basically 1 year in a tree, if you think of it like that, for the rings. And this is 2. And then eventually these will begin to split as we get much more complicated data. So again, that was up in params, special, param viewer. We just clicked on that, dropped it. Okay. So from sets we have vector, which is helpful for planes, grids. This is how you create points in Grasshopper. And vectors are really important to use because they don't actually preview in your viewport, and they can do magnitude and direction, as you learned from math class. And this is helpful instead of using lines. It keeps everything more organized, and you can do more in-depth things such as cross product, amplitude, angle when you're using vectors. So curve, we quickly went over analysis, division, primitive, spline, and utilities. So here's where your offset and your fillet, if you're familiar with CAD and stuff like that, explode. Surface, these all work with full surfaces. You can create surfaces in Grasshopper, or you can reference them in from Rhino. Primitive, utility. Go over here to mesh, we have analysis, primitive, triangulation. Don't use meshes that often because Rhinoceros works in NURBS, which is non-uniform rational B-splines. If you want to read more about that, you can check it out online. I don't know too much about it to explain it, but 3ds Max and stuff like that, those kind of programs work in meshes. So if you need to export or something, you can switch to mesh. Intersect, this works with trimming your curves, finding out if solids intersect curves, if solids intersect solids. This is where if you're familiar with 3D modeling, this is where your differences and booleans are. Intersections. And then transform is how you move things. And a couple other things. Scale, morph, this can get kind of interesting. Transform matrices, group and ungroup. Let's actually go to transform, Euclidean, and move. And we'll just show a slider and a move component real quick. So let's say we want to move this curve that we have highlighted. Let's say we want to move it up 10 inches. So the units are whatever you have set in Rhino. So if you want to just minimize this by double clicking on the top of it and come up here in Rhino to tools and down to options at the bottom, you can come here to units, and right now our units are set in millimeters. So what I want to do is switch millimeters, pull the drop down, and click inches. And that way it says you want to scale it. Yes. It got a little bit smaller. So what you can do is highlight all that and hit Z, S, and then enter. And that will just zoom to whatever you have selected. So now every distance that we move in Grasshopper, it will move that in Rhino and it will be in inches. So what we want to do is move this curve that I have highlighted in green. You can right click on divide and unpreview it if you have that on your canvas. You can also highlight both of these. Click your center scroll wheel again and then click disable preview. So we're just looking at the curve and the 5 points. And then what you want to do is move component is asking for the geometry that you'd like to move and the translation vector of where you'd like to move it to. So we're going to go back up here to vector, and we're going to go just a simple vector, and we're going to get a unit Z because we just want to move them straight up. So click on unit Z, drop that on your canvas. And then what this is asking for is a unit multiplication. So right now it's just 1, so we're only getting a value of 1. So if you plug that into T and you plug your curve into G, you'll see that it'll move it up 1 inch, and it will also create a second curve. So we still have this first curve on the base, and we still have the second curve up here. And this is important because Rhino just Grasshopper continuously copies all of your geometry into the next component. So it will always be here, and you can always manipulate it here, and you can also always manipulate the moved one. So what we want to do is move this 10. So you can either come in here to F and right click on F, and then where it says set number, you can set that to 10, and you'll see that this moves, zoom out a little bit, all the way up to 10. And that's called hard coding the number. So we'll go back and we'll set that back to 1. But say you're not really sure if you want it at 10, maybe you want it at 5, you kind of want to see what it looks like. You can come to params, and this is the number slider, which is probably the most used component in all, because this gives you the variability. This is where Grasshopper really excels. So click on number slider and come down here. Inside of number slider, you have a couple of options. You can just pull this to slide the number, but right now it only goes from 0 to 1. That's the default value, and it has 3 decimal places. If you double click right on the word slider here, it will pull up this little slider dialog box. This is where you can change the name. We'll call this height of curve. It's a pretty long name. The expression, you don't really need to mess with that because you can use another component for that. Grip style, this will be, you can have shape and text. You can just have shape, or you can have box and text, and I'll just show you what that looks like. So box and text is just this box here. If we go to shape and text, it'll be this, and you can also just turn it to shape so the numbers turn off. That's a personal preference. I usually just use shape and text. R, N, E, and 0 means what type of rounding you'd like to use. So R is floating point, which if you saw before we had 3 decimal places, that's what this little 3 is, how many digits you have. So you can change this to any number, and you'll see down here that the digits change. So we'll leave that at 3. Actually, I think we'll go to integer numbers, which is N. So if you click on that, this will gray out, so you can't move it anymore. And now it will just go from 0 to 1, jumping by an integer. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, no decimal places. And then even and odd, if you just like the even numbers, just like the odd. So down here you can set your minimum value by double clicking. Right now we'll leave ours at 0. And then every time you have to hit this little check mark to make sure that you want that number. And then double click on the max. And then we'll set this to 10. And click on the check mark. You can come down here and click and drag this number and pull it if you like that way more. You can also click all the way out to here, and then it will pull all the numbers in between. I think this gets kind of annoying once you pull this and you pull one of these, and then you start messing up all the numbers. If you just double click on it and say 10, I'll set this back to 0 because it got changed. Okay, so now our min is 0, our max is 10, and this numeric value is where you want to set that value. So we'll just leave it at 0. You can pull this anywhere you want. See any of the numbers in between 1 and 10, or 0 and 10. Hit OK. So now this slider goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 10. We'll leave it at 1. And then what you want to do is plug this into your factor value. And you'll see it didn't move because we have it set to 1. But the nice part is you can grab this slider and slide it all the way from 0 to 10, and as you'll see in the viewport, curve is moving from 1 inch to 10 inches as you move it, so you can check how you want it to look. So let's say we were making a wall or something. What I'll do is a little more helpful if we'll do a loft. We'll just search for a loft, click on loft, and this is asking for the section curve, so this will be, you just want, first you want your base curve, and then if you want to plug more than one in, you'll see when I try to plug this in that it goes away. It keeps going away, whichever one I plug in. If you want two of them to go into one, you plug that one in, then you hold shift, and you'll get this little green and the plus arrow, and then you'll plug that into S. So now what we have is a lofted surface, you'll see in Rhino. And we can come back down here to our slider, and just pull that curve, and it will move our lofted surface. So as deep as you go into this lofted surface, this slider will still affect it. So this is where the parametric part comes into Grasshopper. Okay, so we'll just save this file, save document, we'll save it as testing script. And this covers a lot of the basics of what Grasshopper can do and sort of how the components and everything work. And in the next one we'll talk a little bit more about data trees, and we'll do circle packing. Also, one more thing, if you have multiple scripts open in the top right, let's say I go and I create a new document, that document didn't go away. These points are still referenced, so you have to save the Rhino file as well if you're working with Rhino geometry that's referenced in. So we'll go to File, Save As, make sure we put it in the same place, and we'll call this Testing Rhino. Save. And then if you ever want to get back to it in your Grasshopper file, just click up here in the top right where it says unnamed, click on that, and this will pull up all of your open scripts. You can close them from here if you want, or you can just click on it and it will open that back up and everything returns. Alright, hopefully that wasn't too fast, and you could follow everything, and I'll see you in the next one.